Hello there everyone, welcome to Corey Loses, where today we're going to be talking about Stellar Warfare, which is an indie space strategy game. This is a game that I've covered a bit on the channel. We had a live stream a few months ago with the developer of the game, but I wanted to do a bit more of an overview and talk about some of the stuff that's actually changed since that live stream. So for those who may have missed that, Stellar Warfare is a space RTS where you actually design your own ships. So in the main menu you go to a fleet designer mode, and there are different slots that you have for your fleet. So you're able to use different hull components, different weapon components, and there's a huge breadth of options that give you a lot of different ways that you can play the game and build your fleet. You start off with a kind of default loadout and then a few other options unlocked so you can play around with some of them, but then as you play, you unlock more options. So there's enough to let you kind of get a feel for how the systems work and play around with things when you start off, but because you unlock some of them by playing, there isn't so much thrown at you that it becomes overwhelming when you're taking your first look at it. When you get into the actual space combat portions of it, it is primarily built around doing player versus player multiplayer, but there's also a single player wave survival mode where you're fighting against different waves of ships that come at different intervals. It's pretty clear that games like Homeworld 2 and Supreme Commander had a big influence on the development of Stellar Warfare, but it doesn't feel overly derivative of either. So if you are a fan of either of those games, or even something like Sins, you should find a lot to like in the combat here. The maps are fully 3D, and much like in Homeworld, you go and you find different asteroids that you're mining your resources from, and the battles can get quite large and they look really good. The game is very much a work in progress, so there's still regular updates and new features being previewed by the developer. Last time I actually had a few points that I made about some of the readability in the game where I felt like there were certain things that could be documented a bit better, and this is actually something that has improved a lot in the last few months since we last covered the game. At that point, the ship icon overlays that you can see when you're kind of zoomed out were a relatively new feature, and now there's additional things like health bars and tooltips that show which loadouts that all the enemy ships and your ships have. That helps convey a lot of information in the game. There were always good visual indicators when things were actually firing or being hit, and weapon types were usually clear from that, but the lack of health bars and tooltips showing what they were armed with was something that could make it a little bit harder for new players to come into especially. But now that's all there, and it seems like a lot of those readability complaints that I had before have been addressed. There have been a few new building types added on the defensive side as well as the economy side since the last time I played as well, so the economy has gotten deeper since then, and there's also more options for defense. The artillery buildings I found especially useful in the wave defense mode, and this is something that I actually want to highlight a little bit more, because while the multiplayer was definitely fun, the single player mode might get overlooked, and there's a lot to enjoy there, especially when you mix it with the fleet designer. I had a lot of fun trying to think of different groups of builds that I could make and just send them up against the wave survival mode without having to bring them into a multiplayer match. For example, playing a bit with some ships that have really strong shields and weaker hulls, or switching it up and going with ships that have no shields but stronger hulls and using more repair platforms. The shield modules, I believe, are new since the last time I played, so there's going to be even more of these types of things to play around with as the game approaches its proper release. There are some anti-missile lasers that are being added in that I don't think are in the build I have just yet, but those should all open up different possibilities for different ways to play the game. The game isn't officially available yet and it doesn't have a full release date, but you can support the developer on patreon.com. There will be a link in the description for Tense Games, which does come with occasional beta builds that are released and you're able to jump in and play like that. You can also go to the other link in the description to add the game to your Steam wishlist if you want to keep an eye on development there. I'm going to be trying to keep an eye on development here on the channel, so if you want to see more of this game as it develops, you can subscribe here. We're hopefully going to have a few more games coming up with the developer to kind of go over some of those changes and use them in multiplayer, so keep an eye out for that as well. I do recommend giving it a shot if you are a fan of RTS games, and I think that indie games really have a good opportunity to kind of bring back a genre that has been kind of left behind by the game industry. So hope you guys have enjoyed, hope you're looking forward to more Stellar Warfare. Thanks for watching, hope to see you next time.